There's an island roughly the size of France sitting right off the coast of Africa. You can practically see it from the mainland. Yet for the vast majority of human history, nobody lived there. Not a soul. We settled the Americas, crossed into Australia thousands of years ago, built empires and sailed oceans. But this enormous island stayed completely empty until around 350 to 550 AD, when the first settlers finally arrived, not from nearby Africa, but from Southeast Asia, from the Indonesian archipelago, thousands of miles across open ocean. We know this from language rather than bones or ruins. Malagasy, the language spoken across the country today, belongs to the same family as languages spoken in Borneo and the Philippines. So even with an inhabited continent right next door, islanders from the other side of the Indian Ocean got there first. Bantu-speaking Africans followed in the centuries after, and Arab traders arrived as early as the 7th century, turning Madagascar into a busy stop on Indian Ocean trade routes. Tamil merchants from South India came too. So by the time Europeans showed up claiming to have discovered the place, it had already been a layered, multicultural world for hundreds of years. The first European to set foot there was Portuguese navigator Diego Dias, who bumped into the island in 1500. From then on, European powers kept coming. The Portuguese raided coastal Muslim settlements. The French built a fort in the early 1640s, and the British even dreamed big enough that a poet wrote verses about a prince ruling this golden isle. Reality was less romantic. Of 140 colonists sent by the British in 1644, barely a handful came back alive, with no gold or pearls, just a grim lesson in how brutal the island could be to uninvited guests. While Europeans fumbled along the coastline, powerful kingdoms were consolidating inland. The Sakalava Empire in the west, the Bet-Simisaraka Confederation briefly on the east coast, but the kingdom that would eventually swallow the others rose on the central plateau, the Mauryan Kingdom. In the early 1800s, King Radama I unified nearly the entire island with British backing, invited European craftsmen, welcomed missionaries, and even adopted the Latin alphabet for the Malagasy language. For a moment, Madagascar looked like it might become a fully sovereign, modern nation on its own terms. Then Radama died in 1828, and his widow, Queen Ranavalona I, reversed course entirely, banning Christianity, expelling missionaries, and beating back a joint British-French military attempt in 1845. After her death in 1861, the floodgates reopened. French business interests poured in, missionaries returned, and an increasingly impatient France launched the First Franco-Marino War in 1883. By 1895, French troops were marching on the capital, and after shelling Antananarivo, Queen Ranavalona III surrendered. France declared Madagascar a colony the following year, exiled the royal family, and spent roughly 15 years on what it called a pacification campaign. In reality, a brutal military suppression of resistance. A kingdom built over centuries was erased in months. By 1947, the Malagasy had had enough and launched a massive uprising, which France crushed. But an idea that's strong doesn't stay buried. And just 13 years later, Malagasy leaders were at the negotiating table, voting for autonomy within the French community. On June 26, 1960, the Malagasy Republic was formally declared, with Philibert Tsiranana as its first president, an independent nation at last, sitting on one of the most extraordinary pieces of land on the planet. And it really is extraordinary. The island sits in the Indian Ocean off Southeast Africa, with the Comoros Islands to the northwest and Réunion and Mauritius to the east, close enough to Africa to feel connected, yet always doing its own thing. It's the fourth largest island on Earth, after Greenland, New Guinea, and Borneo, covering around 226,000 square miles. Its shape is just as distinctive as its size. The east coast runs in an almost perfectly straight line facing the open Indian Ocean, while the west coast is deeply contoured with bays, inlets, and natural harbors, which is exactly why Arab traders, European explorers, and pirates found it so appealing. But the island's real defining feature is its spine, a mountain ridge running nearly its entire length from north to south, splitting the country into two different worlds. To the east lies dense rainforest, and a narrow coastal plain. To the west, savanna. Along that central ridge sit the highlands, home to the capital Antananarivo, where the soil is a striking rusty red thanks to iron and aluminum oxides, earning Madagascar the nickname the Great Red Island. Its highest point, Maramacotro in the north, rises to nearly 9,500 feet. The climate is just as split as the terrain. Hot, humid, and cyclone-battered in the east, near desert in the southwest, and cool, dry winters with stormy summers, and occasional frost at elevation in the highlands. If the word Madagascar makes you think of the animated film with a lion, giraffe, zebra, and hippo, you're not alone, but the real wildlife is the true star of the island. When Madagascar split from the supercontinent Gondwana roughly 85 to 90 million years ago, everything on it evolved in total isolation, and the result is that around 90% of its species exist nowhere else on Earth. There are no elephants or lions, but there are ancient baobabs, chameleons found nowhere else, over 100 species of lemurs, no snakes dangerously venomous to humans, and nearly 900 species of orchids. That ecosystem, millions of years in the making, is disappearing fast, torn apart by deforestation, agricultural fires, soil erosion, and climate change, and the economy is under similar strain. On paper, the ingredients for success are all there: rich soil, rare minerals, extraordinary biodiversity, and a tourism industry with huge untapped potential. Yet Madagascar remains one of the poorest countries on Earth. In 2023, its GDP was around $14.5 billion, but spread across roughly 31.2 million people. That works out to a GDP per capita of about $500 a year, not per month, per year. Growth has averaged only around 2% annually since 1961, though the last decade has been somewhat better, closer to 4%, with 4.3% recorded in 2024. The numbers have swung wildly along the way, from a peak of nearly 9.85% growth in 1979 to a collapse of minus 12.7% in 2022 during a severe political crisis, the kind of volatility that wrecks investor confidence for years afterward. Agriculture remains the core structural issue. Over 70% of the population farms, but most of it is subsistence level, growing just enough to feed the family with little left to sell. Rice, cloves, coffee, and vanilla are the main crops, and Madagascar actually produces the majority of the world's vanilla supply. Yet the farmers growing it often see very little of the profit. Mining offers more optimism, with significant deposits of nickel, cobalt, and ilmenite that experts expected to drive growth through 2024 and 2025, though whether that investment ever reaches ordinary Malagasy people, rather than just boosting export revenue, remains an open question. Madagascar has the resources and the potential. What it's lacked is the stability to build on them. What's never been lost, though, is culture. To understand the Malagasy, it helps to understand one core belief: the dead are not gone. Traditional belief holds that ancestors, the Razana, remain present and influential long after death, capable of bringing both good fortune and misfortune, which is why family tombs are often built with more care and expense than the homes of the living. This belief reaches its fullest expression in the Famadahana, or turning of the bones, where families exhume their ancestors' remains, rewrap them in fresh silk, and spend the day feasting, dancing, and celebrating together, essentially catching the ancestors up on family news. Far from being morbid, it's considered one of the most joyful ceremonies on the island, built on the idea that death isn't an ending, but simply an extension of life in a different form. Madagascar's cultural identity is just as layered as its history, with 18 major ethnic groups spread across the island. The Zafamanari, recognized by UNESCO as master wood carvers, the coastal Vizo, extraordinary fishermen who live on the water, and the Mahafali in the south, known for elaborately carved tombs that rank among the island's most striking artworks, among many others that make Madagascar one of the most culturally rich places on Earth.